Hello, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Maria Luisa Fantapie, and I'm the head of the Mediterranean, Middle East and Africa program at the Istituto Affari Internazionali. I am particularly pleased today to host colleagues and friends from the Gulf alongside ambassadorial representation here in Rome, and as well as distinguished Italian speakers. We are going to, I mean, the idea of this event obviously came out of the unfolding event in the Red Sea, but really the approach that we are going to take, it's an interdisciplinary approach. On the one hand, we will definitely discuss the threat to freedom of navigation, but I want here also to remind everyone before starting our discussion that freedom of navigation is first and foremost the result of a shared vision that both Gulf countries and Mediterranean countries, European countries will have about regional stability, and also shared lines of work on how they both see the global order. So we should both tackle the military defense aspect, but also the political aspect that is underneath this crisis. Without further ado, let me hand over the floor to Alessandro Marrone, my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Luisa. Welcome, and indeed, let me just echo her words, since the issues at stake require the blending of different expertise and the involvement of plurality of interlocutors and stakeholders. In this case, as in many others, international security and defense are an important piece of a much broader and much more complex picture. And actually, Italy's foreign and defense policy traditionally look in a pretty holistic way to international security environment in both regional and thematic terms. And in regional terms, I mean, Italy in recent years has been using a lot the concept of enlarged Mediterranean, of wider Mediterranean. So a regional security complex including continental Europe, North Africa, Sahel, Horn of Africa, and the Middle East. Or in other words, if you wish, in naval terms, from the Gulf of Guinea to the west, through the Gulf of Aden to the east, through the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, the Gulf, and the Black Sea. And if you look at strategic documents of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Defense, they look at this region in a pretty holistic view, looking at infrastructure, economy, migration, instability, terrorism, and of course also security and defense, trade, energy, etc. So as head of defense program, I've been particularly glad to cooperate with Maria Luisa on the organization of this event, and look forward to the conversation. And without further ado, let's start the conversation with a keynote speaker. I'm really honored to call to the podium the ambassador of France in Italy. Let me double check the pronunciation. Martin Brien.
Martin Brien.
She is the French language expert. I'm the English one.
Grazie. No, vraiment, thank you very much to IAI for organizing this event on an issue which is obviously very important these days, but I guess this is going to remain important for the foreseeable future. So I'm very pleased to be here with you this morning to discuss maritime security and the action taken both by the EU and France in particular in the region. So yes, we're talking about the Red Sea mostly from the Suez Canal, which links it to the Mediterranean, to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which connects it to the Indian Ocean. And as you all know, the Red Sea is a key artery for the global economy, as between 16,000 and 18,000 ships pass through the straits every year. More than 10% of the global maritime freight passes through its waters, accounting for the majority of trade between Asia and Europe. And I mentioned Asia because I'll talk about it later again. This sea, which opens out into the Somali basin, is one of the world's most strategic shipping lanes, along with Malacca and Panama, particularly for us Europeans. We're going to talk about tensions as well, and tension in a way is an understatement, because when we see what the Houthis are doing, we can talk about act of wars against merchant ships and also our ships. Tensions on our strategic maritime routes are nothing new, but yes, we have changed scales, obviously. In the years 2000, following the collapse of the Somali state, we've seen the rise of a phenomenon of maritime piracy at the opening of the Red Sea and then throughout the northwestern Indian Ocean. At that time, France, which held the presidency of the EU, initiated the European Union's first maritime operation, Operation Atalanta, which has been active since 2008. This operation can be now considered as a success because we've seen now a sharp decline in acts of piracy off the coast of Somalia. And since 2020, Atalanta's area of operation has also been extended to the Red Sea to foster cooperation with other maritime security operations in the area. Its area of operation has been extended, but also its mandate. Now its mandate includes the fight against drug trafficking. So this operation, its official name is EUNAVFOR Atalanta, is already mobilizing many European countries. I will mention France, Italy, Spain, and Germany in particular. And this operation contributes to strengthening the safety of shipping in the northern Indian Ocean region. Then we also started another operation, this time in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, obviously because of the many human, economic and security interests that bind us to this region. So we launched in 2019 Operation EMASO, European-led maritime awareness in the Strait of Hormuz, which is a maritime surveillance mission aimed at stabilizing the area and helping to preserve freedom of navigation while protecting European and international economic interests. As of today, 8 countries are taking part in EMASO, including Italy, which has twice taken command of the operation for 6 months in 2022 and 2023. And since the end of 2023, the operation has been commanded by Belgium. Now let's go back to the Red Sea. It's true that today, when we talk about the safety of shipping and the protection of maritime trades, it's today in the Red Sea that the most serious threats are concentrated, with the attacks perpetrated by the Houthis against ships with the support of Iran. The Houthis officially link their attacks to the situation in Gaza, but the result is here. These attacks have a toll on European markets and economy, and Italy in particular have interest. As Minister Tajani said, today 40% of Italy's GDP comes from exports, making sea routes security a vital priority for the country and for all of us in the EU. So there have been a number of reactions to this situation. The United States has decided to respond in an offensive manner with attacks against Houthis rebels and has set up an Operation Prosperity Guardian. And at the same time, the EU, with a strong Franco-Italian lead, has set up the Aspides mission, which has more defensive concepts. And of course, why it is important for the EU? Because it has strong interests, and the role of the EU is also to defend access to resources for its member states. What is quite remarkable about the operation is that it was decided in a really in a very short time, which is not that common in the EU. And this has enabled the operation to start, to be launched formally on February 19th, so in a very short time. Contributors to the operation to date include Greece, where the operation is commanded from, as well, Italy, which provides the command in the area, France, Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Not all of them have ships at the same time in the operation, but with all these participants, we can hope to have a regular turnover. Just to give you an overview of our presence, the French presence in the region today, as of last week, we had first a French multi-mission frigate, FREM, as part of the Aspides operation. We have another frigate, the Lafayette frigate, deployed to the Gulf of Aden and the Gulf of Oman to help secure maritime trade, excluding the scope of Aspides. We have also a surveillance frigate deployed in the Indian Ocean, which carries out maritime patrols on behalf of Combined Task Force 150, which is a multinational coalition carrying out maritime surveillance mission to combat terrorism, piracy, and drug trafficking. And also, we have an Atlantic 2 maritime patrol aircraft based in Djibouti, which is a key area, which is conducting operational maritime surveillance flights in the Gulf of Aden to contribute to the freedom of movement and situational awareness. And so we have all these assets deployed in the region, which contribute to the maritime safety objectives that we've set and in support of the EU's goals in the region. So, as of this day, what are the first lessons we can draw from this Operation Aspides? First, it has already proved its effectiveness, and the ships deployed within the Operation Aspides have already acted several times, including yesterday, where an Italian frigate, Fasan, destroyed a drone yesterday. And as of today, I hope I'm not wrong on the figures, the ships deployed within the mission have been able to defeat 12 attacks and have escorted 68 ships, so including yesterday. Second, what does the threats from the Houthis mean? In a way, it shows a kind of return to the real world. First, showing that non-state actors can benefit from very effective capabilities. Of course, they are supported by a state actor, by Iran. But it means that even when you're not a state, you can really inflict great damage on a key element of a global economy. Which means also that for our navies, we must relearn to combat, high-intensity threats. We must display innovation. And so we've started reusing guns, cannons, to shoot down drones, for example. Or even we had an helicopter from the French Navy destroying one of these drones with a very simple machine guns. So it's not only $600,000 or $500,000 missiles that are used, but also lower-end systems. But we have to really think about how can we defend ourselves against these threats. Third lesson, of course, there's a question about the sustainability of the operation. We've started this. When does it end? Will it end the day, the Gaza operation stop? Nobody knows. But what it means is that we need partnerships among us, Europeans, obviously. So we have to train for that, but also partnership with key actors in the region. And I would like to mention one, which is Djibouti, because without our bases in Djibouti, France has a base, Italy has a base, others have also support facilities, and we need partners to work on that. The third or the fourth lesson is about, the multiplication of EU operations in the region. We have now several operations. We have Atalanta, we have Aspides, and we have also another operation which is not per se an EU operation, which is called Agenor. So the question is, at some point, maybe we should, rationalize all this for more efficiency. Then there is the question about the prevention of what the Houthis are doing. So our American friends are preventing it by, striking. This is not the choice we've made. But there is the question of the supply of weapons and drones to the Houthis that we need to address. Today, the Aspides mandate is limited to maritime situational awareness and self-defense protection tasks. But there is the question of arms trafficking. And so we have to really to address this. Then we have the question of our means. I mean, we are firing Aster missiles, a number of them. I think so far the French Navy has fired 22 Aster missiles. We don't have that many, and also we are supplying some to Ukraine for its defense. And the problem is that to resupply with this kind of missiles, which are very complex, systems, it takes a lot of time. So it goes back to the question we are seeing in the framework of the Ukraine crisis, which is the ability of our industrial base to supply us with the armaments we need. So this is a key question. And also, as I mentioned, maybe finding ways not to use these very high-end missiles to respond to a threat. So this is the whole question of what we call the war economy. This is an issue that we are trying to deal with our EU partners, and especially our Italian partners, because the Aster missile is from MBDA, which is a Franco-Italo-British company. And yesterday, the two ministers of defense, Guido Crosetto and Sébastien Lecornu, met in Corsica precisely to discuss that. Last question is about third countries. The Americans and the Brits are doing their part. We are doing ours. What about others? After all, international shipping is not an issue only for for Europe and for the United States. As I mentioned, Asia is on the other end. So where are the main, I would say the big Asian countries, which obviously have an interest? So if you take China, for example, it seems that China is happy to signal that they have Chinese ships going through, and so they are not going to be threatened because they are Chinese. But this is not enough. After all, when a French or an Italian ship is targeted, it has an impact on trade with China, with India, with Japan, whatever. So there's a question there that is, why should we only bear the burden of protecting international trade in the Red Sea? So I wouldn't go as far as say that some might have a clandestine passenger behavior. I don't say that. But still, the question about how can we, bring them on board, I think is an important question. So I will conclude because I think my time is up. This Aspides mission, which has been really set up in a very short time, which is an operational mission, even a combat mission to some extent, shows, I think, what is the future of European defense. We need speed, we need efficiency, we need a strong mandate. and it shows, you know, and it displays interoperability. Well, I speak under the control of the ones who really know about it. But, and I think this is really what we have to do. That is to bring together our strategic cultures, improve our interoperability, have more exercise, have our navies trained together, our air force trained together. This has been the aim of what we launched a few years ago, which we call the European Intervention Initiative. The idea being, how do we build, you know, pragmatic cooperation between Europeans? And as President Macron said the other day, at La Sorbonne, he delivered a speech on the future of Europe, including a huge part on European defense. We need now to move forward, maybe to launch a phase 2 of this European Intervention Initiative, really to deliver more action, more results, more operations in the real world. So, yes, we think we need to join forces with our European neighbors in the Mediterranean. And if tomorrow there's a major contingency in the Indo-Pacific, maybe our American friends will be less present. And so we really need to prepare for that day, should it happen, where we have to do more to protect our common interest. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ambassador, for setting the scene so well for our debate by touching several issues and by going through different levels, strategic levels, diplomatic, military, industrial one, and also thanks for being explicit on EU and EU member states' interests, actions, assets. I think that the French frank and concrete approach brings clarity to the debate with the other European partners. Without further ado, I'm glad to call on stage the speakers for the session. So, Mohamed Baroun, Director General, Dubai Public Policy Research Center; Badr El Saif, Founding President, Al Saif Consulting and Assistant Professor, Kuwait University; Cesare D'Amico, Vice President, Confitarma; Maria Luisa Vantapié, Head of the Mediterranean, Middle East and Africa Program. She will change her hat and deliver a speech as well. So please join us on stage. We are really glad to have views from the region, and so, as I mentioned before, to have different perspective and expertise at the table. So I will start right exactly from the region, so from Mr. Baroun. Welcome at TI. Could you please give us a reading from United Arab Emirates about the importance of interconnectivity between the Gulf, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean basin, including best practices, perhaps, to end attacks on Red Sea from your perspective? I guess, and has been mentioned, the Red Sea can be seen as an expansion of Gaza conflict, and I would be interested to hear about how to prevent further crises across the region and across seas in relation with this conflict. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Sandro, thank you for the introduction. Maria, thank you for the invitation. Pleasure to be here with you. Now, let's start with the first issue, which is connectivity between Mediterranean and the Gulf states. If you look at the geostrategic space we exist in as Gulf states, it's the Arabian Peninsula. And the Arabian Peninsula is surrounded by 4 waterways: the Arabian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean. So there's a direct, connection as we see our geostrategic space interaction, and the Mediterranean is, of course, one of them. The other thing you talked about, interconnectivity, and interconnectivity or connectivity agenda. It's not only about trade. We talk about trade, but it's connected actually to very important issues. We talk about supply chain, the health of the supply chain, which has underneath it tucked energy security. So you cannot talk about energy security and supply of energy without talking about this ability to move energy across the sea. And we're talking about energy across the sea, but then there is also energy not only in the form of oil, gas, and hydrogen. There's also electricity with the subsea cables now extending from Egypt to Athens, and then from Morocco to the UK. There's also connectivity is not regional, it's global. And rightfully, Ambassador mentioned the role of Asia, but we also look at Africa, we also look at South America. So a small incident, and this is the so-called butterfly effect in the Red Sea, can affect charges of insurance and have complications on everything else, down to the price of rice or the price of sugar that I pay at the supermarket next day. So we are in an ecosystem that's very much interconnected with everyone. So we'll talk about the attacks and what are the best practices. And we're specifically, when we're talking about maritime security, and we talk about the Red Sea, we are specifically talking about the Houthis attack. And what is definitely one of the lessons learned is that security measures alone do not really help. And if we want to compare, and allow me, Your Excellency, to make that comparison between the US mission and the European mission, the US mission immediately managed to expand the threat. It exasperated the threat, it did not reduce it. One, they started attacking ships by boarding them, and they specifically, the Houthis said, we are only targeting either Israeli ships or ships going to Israel. But after the direct attacks from the UK and the US, they're targeting all American ships and all UK ships, regardless whether they are Israeli-owned or Israeli-bound. So that immediately has changed. Also, the data, or the target bank, if you want, that they are using. They also changed the pattern of the attack. So instead of boarding ships, we've seen attacks with drones, we've seen attack with cruise missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, and lately there were talk about attacks with submarine or remotely controlled submarines. So again, these are different type of attacks that we haven't seen at the beginning, we're seeing right now. So there's a more escalation. And in recent days, we've heard the Houthis saying we're targeting ships all the way in the Gulf of Aden and even beyond that in the Indian Ocean. So it's not in the Red Sea anymore. So that makes us ask ourselves, what does the Houthi really want? What is their attacks? Are the Houthis similar to the pirates, the Somali pirates, or not? Frankly, you know, they're both non-state actors, and they're both sort of a result of a failed state. But is it really exactly the same as non-state actors? I think the Houthis are primarily looking for legitimacy. They did not find legitimacy inside their own house. Now they're finding it in chance in the US. When people are asking the Houthis to strike and make the ships turn around. This is the type of legitimacy that they're looking for through the gateway of what is happening in Gaza. So Gaza might not be, you know, might be the way they're using it, but the end goal for them is that they now have found new area for legitimacy, international legitimacy that they were lacking inside. But they're also benefiting from a deficit in the world order. And that is the role when this is the grassroots movement we're seeing in the US. People coming out against the lack of international governance because the world system, in their views, is failing them, and that makes grassroots move. Grassroots move into universities in the US, but it manifests itself in Houthis and non-state actors who would like to go and use that deficit and force themselves across. And that makes the question of how to respond to them even more difficult, in my view, rather than easier. So a one-dimensional approach, and we've seen the very diplomatic differentiation between defensive and offensive operations. But the direct military approach in its own does not really help. And if we take the Somalia example, Somalia was not only addressed through the Atalanta mission. It was also addressed economically through investing in, and diplomatically. There was an investment in statehood in the state of Somalia. There was investment in the Somalian economy through the ports that the UAE went ahead and started to. So there was an investment in statehood to counter the state actors, or non-state actors, sorry. And we also needed an investment in de-escalation and in economic terms. So on the short term, we needed de-escalation. And I think this is one of the things that the US-led mission, the Guardians of Prosperity, did not provide, which is a diplomatic leg to it. It has a military leg, but no diplomatic leg. Usually the military leg is very important to draw that line in the sand, but you need to follow up immediately with a diplomatic effort, and we did not see that happen. So this is one of those things that we've sort of missed. On the longer term, we're definitely looking at this as the health of the supply chain. So the supply chain will need to be resilient, but also will need to be redundant. And I think this is one of the reasons now we see the region are looking into new ways to make the supply chain redundant. So we've got multiple supply chains, and the latest one was this agreement with UAE, Qatar, Turkey, and Iraq on the route of development, or the corridor of development. So this is a way of making sure that the supply chain is not affected, and therefore the overall effect of blocking one artery becomes problematic. And I commend you, Your Excellency, for using the word artery. I think it's very important, because when you have a block in the artery, if you're a doctor, the first thing you do is an angiogram. The next thing you do is a bypass. Now we've jumped into bypasses immediately. We haven't explored the possibility of an angiogram. One last thing that I will add is that there's also a new calculation when it comes to national security. And the new national security paradigms will have to bring in, at least in the Gulf countries right now, they have to bring in global security issues like food security, energy security, health security, and climate security. This means that we need more cooperation. Possibly we need more bridges rather than walls. So when you're thinking about your own security, you cannot think only about protecting your own national grounds. You need bridges that would allow that type of cooperation that would allow you to address those other issues. And I think this is one of those very important factors that drive the de-escalation strategies that we see in the GCC. At least from when it comes to the UAE, there started the de-escalation with Israel. There's a de-escalation with Turkey, de-escalation with Syria, de-escalation now with Iran. These are powered by the same concept that there are much bigger issues that we cannot address only by securing our own borders. We'll have to go beyond that. So, and lastly, I would say there is a very important need to invest in statehood. Statehood of Yemen, because the Houthis, as non-state actors, can do things they will not do as state. Statehood in Iran, dealing with Iran as a state rather than a non-state or a rogue state. Statehood of Palestine. Without a statehood in Palestine, we will always face those type of problems, because this concept of resistance, non-state actors resisting, will always come through. Now, the issues that has come is if Gaza is over, will the Houthis stop their attacks or not? My own views is that they will, momentarily. And then they will find another reason to do the same thing, because they will always find. But they will do immediately, because otherwise they will lose their entire legitimacy over this issue of Palestine. But then there will be another attack on Palestine or somewhere else, and then they will say, we are defending the others, and this is our way of defending them. And I think to stop this, we will have to make sure that, one, Yemen, all of Yemen, is part of the international world order. Two, their interests are connected to it. I mean, the Houthis cannot do this and expect that ships will still land in Hodeidah, and they will still get the oil or sell the oil, that they will still buy food and sell food if they're affecting everyone else. So if you're going to benefit from the system, you have to play by the system. This is the basis FIFA rules, if you want. We need to have that investment in statehood. We need to have investment in making them attached to the economic ecosystem. And we cannot do this without them being a state. And I'll stop there.
Many thanks again. Many thanks too for bringing to the table thought-provoking views. Again, very clear and explicit. And I liked a lot of the metaphor of the two legs, because as we all know, a person with a single leg cannot walk and not even stand on her foot. Mr. Bader, from your point of view, following these lines, is a defensive approach successful in delivering freedom of navigation? And which opportunities for cooperation between the GCC countries and the European Union, so the Gulf countries and European countries, in ensuring freedom of navigation in this very wide area, from the Mediterranean Sea to the Gulf?
Thank you, Alessandro and Maria, for having me over. It's a pleasure to be with you here. It's a hard act to follow after my good friend and colleague Mohammed, but I'll try to match. Let me start with the second question first, and I want to give a bird's eye view at EU-GCC relations before I go into the freedom of navigation issue. And for EU-GCC, we've seen a lot of developments and action in the last 2 to 3 years. We have a strategic vision, we have a partnership agreement, we have a special representative from the EU at the moment, we have a lot of high-level meetings that have been taking place both in the region, lately in Oman and Riyadh, and in Europe last week, lately in Luxembourg. So there has been a lot of hype and action. But I think there is more to be done, and I'll try to put those more to be done action lists into 3 buckets. And those 3 buckets are people, policies, and process. And I'll start with people, and I'll end with people as well before I go into the specific issue in the Red Sea. In terms of people, I think we need to exert even more effort to understand one another. That is, how do people in the Gulf think, act, what are the internal dynamics moving them, how do they see each other, how do they see themselves? And I say this because it's quite a tricky time to be living in the Gulf. The Gulf is arguably leading the Middle East at the moment. There is a lot of changes happening. So we are at a battle to understand ourselves and our changes as we move along with them, let alone having others like our European partners get to understand the totality of the Gulf. And I cannot overestimate the notion of connecting people to people. Yes, we have elite gatherings, we have governments meeting with one another, but we need to be on the ground. And we need to understand what civil society is all about. Some would try to counter that there isn't much activity on the ground in the Gulf. I beg to differ. I think there is a vibrant society there, and there is much to understand, both internally and across regions. So that's in the people bucket. Now, in terms of policies, and I would like to shamelessly mention an article that I wrote with a colleague of mine, Dalia Ghanem, with the EU think tank, EUISS, about the EU-GCC relations, which talks about the policy angle even more. What we've seen between the EU and the GCC is an overkill, what I call. There has been an overambitious attempt to cover all domains possible between the relationship. And sometimes things get lost in the process. For example, if you look at the different statements and the different committees that we have there, we have over 13 themes that are being worked on at the same time. And that could be too much to digest. And our recommendation in the paper was, and this paper came out before the recent resurgence of attacks in the Red Sea, was to look at maritime security. Because there was a lot of elementary steps that were taken by the combined maritime presence by Europe, and 2 years ago, moving forward, that I think we can build on. And the second bucket was the energy security bucket, whether it be traditional reserves or the clean tech and green energy. And I think we need to focus on those 2 elements further so that the relationship between the EU and the GCC is known for a niche element. So when you think EU, GCC, you're like, oh, maritime, they've been doing it together, they know how to operate it together, and that's where we bring the partnership. Or energy. If you look at last week's statement from Luxembourg, I think they're following into that track. They did specify 5 areas to work on. I mean, granted, the Luxembourg meeting was a regional security meeting, but let me mention those 5 areas. There were nuclear non-proliferation, cybersecurity, counterterrorism, emergency response, and maritime security. So I think we're headed in the right direction, and we need to have more focus on that end. Now, in terms of process, and that's the 3rd P, if you may, the mandate has been quite ambitious. We need to focus it, but we also need to look at the methods of going about it. The EU is a bureaucratic engine, and so is the GCC. And I think we need to find shortcuts around that engine. We need to empower the Special Representative Di Maio. We need to empower the GCC office in Belgium. And we need to have a fast-track approach with very specific agenda items linked to a dashboard with initiatives that become popularized among the people. We need to excite this initiatives prospect to have people know where the EU and GCC are going together. So that's when it comes to the bigger picture, people, policies, and process. Now let me go to the specifics when it comes to the Red Sea escalation. 3 main messages from my end on this, and I'll be a bit more critical of the operation Aspides just to spice up the discussion. I fully agree, it's way better than what the Americans have done. The Americans have really fell for the bait that the Houthis has presented to them. The Houthis, as a non-state actor, cannot govern the country. They haven't shown any interest in governing the country and bringing the people together. So finding anything to latch on that's problematic to then increase their lifeline is something that the Americans are giving them on a silver platter. So the Europeans have been more mature in this response, and that it's refined to a defensive approach. But it's more of a band-aid. I mean, if you look at the mission, it's an annual mission. It's a small budget of around 8 million euros, 4 warships or a small fleet at this stage, and with some challenges. I mean, what's the end game? Gaza is over, as my friend Mohammed mentioned. There will be another cause. So how are we going to go about it? And I hate to say this, but I mean, my first message is concerning all of this. We would like for our European partners to listen to their Gulf partners. We are in the region, we are on the ground, and we have a view of how things are going. And I say this because it has been an unfortunate issue in which we and Europe have a similar shared vision of an international rules order. We are both looking forward to nurturing and cultivating our own peoples, moving our steps in the future. There are other actors in the region that are not doing that. And let me single out Iran and Israel. Both of them, one is an occupying power. This occupation has been ongoing for decades, and this has not been serving the well-being and security of the region. The other is trying to front a non-state actor axis of resistance, quote unquote, that has been destabilizing the region for too long. So they're not in the same pot, if you may. They have differences, and I think one is worse than the other, and we can get into that in the Q&A. But I think we have a very clear contrasting vision. This is the vision that we need to counteract. This is the vision that the Gulf states have been pushing towards their partners for so long, but there hasn't been engagement. And frankly, only when Iran began providing Russians with missiles and other technologies did we see some support from the Europeans on the vision of the Gulf towards their partners in the region. Now, mind you, as Mohammed has mentioned, we have taken the high-level approach, if you may. We're not countering it with attacks. We want to work with all partners in the system. Different Gulf states have gone differently in de-escalating, whether in engaging in discussions with Iran or normalizing for some Gulf states with Israel. So this is how we want to move forward. We don't think posturing in terms of wars and violence and sanctions will take us further. And this is the hard work that needs to be done. And that's my second message. So listening to the Gulf partners is the first. Second, let's go after the root causes. And it intersects with your message, Mohammed, as well. We cannot, think 2 legs, think heart bypass or angiogram, but we really, there is injustices that have been wrought in the system. We have people who have not been afforded a dignified life for various reasons. And I can give you a long list, whether it be people that have been striving for dignity and justice, hence leading to the Arab Spring protests, or people under occupation for decades thinking Palestine, or people who want to live a normal life, I'm thinking Yemenis. And we need to offer them the tools to move on to that bank, which seems like a no-brainer for us in the Gulf and for our European partners, but it's a luxury for many of those peoples in the region. So we need to go to root causes. Diplomacy is the solution. It will be very hard, but we cannot take the operation on its own and strip it from other tools. I think there needs to be a multi-tiered, multi-layered approach in which everything comes in at the same pace that Your Excellency have mentioned, because this has been an impressive way in which the operation came together. Let's have that same pace for other diplomatic processes. And finally, the GCC had just released a month and a half ago its regional security architecture. It's a first-of-a-kind document. I invite you to check it out. It's on their website. Within the document, there are 15 initiatives, 15 efforts. If you go to the effort number 6, it speaks about our topic today. It calls for partnerships in maritime security. It calls for freedom of navigation, and it calls for the Gulf states to invest within its partners to elevate itself. And I think this is an investment that's well worth our time and energy and effort. We need to invest in Gulf partnerships. I think this operation can benefit from having more active Gulf participation. Yes, it will be tricky because we don't want to be seen as a side in which we're operating against the Houthis in a very sensitive spot, but I think there are ways of going about it, data sharing, training, developing, but with a specific case towards having the Gulf take ownership of the Gulf. Yes, we have competing operations in the region. Your Excellency, you named 4 or 5 of them in which France is involved. And yes, other partners or other countries like China and others have to invest. But let's think of the original actors in the area. And it's the Gulf states. And they need to be first and foremost at the center of action. Sometimes they're not, and I think that's where we need to go with their activity. Thank you for your time.
Many thanks, Mr. Badr, for your very pragmatic and thought-provoking speech. And when you talk about the EU to listen the Gulf, it was part of the rationale of this event Maria Luisa wanted to organize. And I will make a step further towards the idea of not only listen to each other, but having an inter-regional dialogue, partnership, and more ownership. Now, let me turn to the third expert at the table, Maria Luisa. So, what's your view about the risks that the conflict in Gaza spills over into regional conflict? Which implications for Europe and the region? And which possibilities of cooperation between the Gulf countries and European countries? I know it's a long question. In reality, it's 3 questions, but you're a good expert and also good at synthesis.
I will be very short because I think that both Mohammed and Badr have very well already set the scene more from the political perspective. And I just wanted to reaffirm once again that there is a fundamental issue that we need to address. And that issue is that Iran and Israel have competing vision of regional integration. And until we don't tackle that and we address that problem together, both the EU member states and the GCC member state, we will be always facing a cascade of crises to which we can give solutions with specific military tools. And I would really like, actually, if I would have a second life, to work on this field, because it feels really that you are achieving things, while in political analysis we sort of, brush around things, and we cannot actually see the impact and the result as quickly as in the military field, parenthesis. But again, the Israel-Iran competing vision of regional integration is at the core and at the root of all these cascades of crisis. And I think that, let me just say that for Iran, I mean, for Iran, I mean, Israel integrating in the region is a threat. Is a threat because Israel normalizing relations with the Arab world, it basically challenges the ideology that it has proposed and promote across its non-state actors and within the Islamic Republic as well. But also it threatens the networks of allies within the Arab states that it has fed. But also the Israel integration in the Arab world, it's in one way, it's challenging Iran's ability to build alliances with the Arab world on the premises of the issue of Palestine, and I think that a more strengthened GCC-Israel cooperation, obviously, it's something that it could threaten the sort of hierarchies of Iran within the broader Gulf. So this is why I think if we look at the vision that Iran, the Islamic Republic, has, Israel integration in the region, it's perceived as a threat. On the other hand, Israel perceives Iran integration in the region and in the Arab world as a threat as well. If Iran has strengthened relations with the Arab partners, this in one way it challenges the idea, the very strong idea that especially this government in Israel has of thinking that it could build a military anti-Iranian front within the Arab world. But obviously, a more integrated Iran with the Arab world also poses a threat for Israeli national security, the way that they see it. It relieves its economy, and obviously it poses less boundary to its proliferation of military assets and nuclear enrichment. So, in one way, I think we have to assume the fact and approach and come to the realization that there are these two competing and mutually exclusive vision of regional integration between these two actors, and what to do with that. I think if we look in the past years, there has been different strategies, and here I come back to what you both have mentioned. So there has been, for example, vis-a-vis of Iran, an offensive strategy, like the maximum pressure strategy. The maximum pressure strategy, it was partial in a way. It didn't work fully because it didn't achieve its unstated goal of removing the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic is still in place. On the other hand, I would also say that the purely diplomatic approach vis-a-vis of Iran, it also delivered a partial result because all the negotiations with the JCPOA were fruitful in sort of putting some boundaries on nuclear enrichment, but still one could also say that they legitimize the presence of Iran allies across the Arab world, and they help the process of their embedment within the different states. So, on the other hand, also, when we look at the approach to Israel, an outward support for diplomatic normalization between Israel and the Arab world without any concession made by Israel on the Palestinian issue, it doesn't work because it's actually backfiring, and it's and we have seen the result of this just on the 7th of October. But also supporting Israel's offensive goals and enlarged national security goals vis-a-vis of Iran, it doesn't work. And we are seeing now that Israel somehow, it has expanded its national security goals, and it's hinting at wanting to engage into an almost direct confrontation with Iran. So supporting the offensive goal of Israel in some way, it also enlarges the conflict. So here again, we are like juggling with the tools of offensive actions and diplomacy and how to deal with this. I think that just to point again to the pathways for EU and GCC to work together, I think we have to really in some way take the lesson of what has been just said. So being at the listening of each other, other, in French, at the écoute of each other. And I think that the approach that has been tested in some of the Gulf states of balancing, on the one hand, a defensive and deterrence approach vis-à-vis of Iran, and on the other hand, also, however, having the diplomacy still at work, it has been a quite successful approach in one way. But I think that overall, both, I mean, EU and GCC, they need to, we need to both work to, in some way, understand how to place some restraints, both on the Iran side and both on the Israel side. On the Iran side, as I said, I think that the combination of both a defensive action, not offensive one, and the diplomacy, it could sort of, quoting Mohammed's previous conversations that I had in the past, some sort of create a context that modifies the behavior of the Islamic Republic. You cannot change the Islamic Republic, is a fact, but you can create a different context around the Islamic Republic that twists the arm of the Islamic Republic and force it to act differently. On the other hand, I think that there is also much needed work to be done to operate some restraints on Israel offensive actions, because otherwise, especially when it comes to this government that is currently in, I mean, this current Israeli government, this is really like sort of leading us to a full regional war, of which we will all pay the consequences. So I think that both sides, both the EU and GCC, can work on the restraints of both sides. And again, I think that from the EU perspective, we really need to see the value of having, of seeing the Arab world somehow as a pearl of this equilibrium and balancing between these two players, Israel, Iran. Maybe we cannot persuade the Iranians to behave in a certain way or the Israelis to behave a certain way, but a stronger cooperation with the Arab world and specifically with the GCC country can operate as a balancing act between these two. And also this will obviously lead to potentially a proposal of a solution on the Israel-Palestine conflict. I will end it there. I painted the big brushes, I know, and, but I thought that also this was important to sort of give the bigger context. Thank you.
Many thanks, Maria Luisa, for this passionate analysis of Iran-Israel confrontation, which is a very sensitive topic in Italy and in Europe with the plurality of views. But we at TI don't shy away from sensitive topics. If can I advertise our magazine Affari Internazionali, last month the issue, the number of Affari Internazionali dealt with Aspides, and it included 3 articles. My article, strongly in favor of Aspides. Maria Luisa's article, putting on the table the absence of a diplomatic leg and the shortcomings and weaknesses pointed also by colleagues. And Vincenzo Camporini article saying that from a military point of view, Aspides was not enough. So we covered a very good variety of views in this magazine for those who read Italian or can ask help to Google Translator. Now, we talk a lot about Aspides. Now we have the opportunity to talk with Aspides, and namely with the Force Commander Stefano Costantino, Rear Admiral for the Italian Navy. I'm really extremely grateful, and thanks on behalf of IAI, Rear Admiral Costantino, for taking the time and the patience to be with us this morning and to give his contribution to debate. I mean, the question is pretty simple from your unique point of view in the Fazan flagship in the Red Sea. How did the situation in this area evolve after Aspides has been launched, and what you can tell us about the mission itself? Commander, could you hear us?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation. Very fruitful opportunity for us. I'm on board ITS Italian ship Fazan. Close to me there is my chief of staff, Captain Cuoco. We are sailing alongside this line of communication Red Sea, conducting close protection in favor of a couple of merchant vessels. I would like to provide, as you said, a sort of maritime perspective about the activity in the area. Aspides means a kind of shield, so that just to stress our defensive posture in terms of maritime security operation. In this slide, you can see our mission on the top of the slide. I would like to point out 3 keywords, key concepts in the mission: the freedom of navigation, the maritime security, and the last but not the least, the cooperation. Cooperation for us is essential because without any kind of support coming from other actors at different level involved in the maritime security, could be quite impossible to support the security in the area, the protection in favor of the merchant and commercial vessel. So that stemming from this mission, as you can see, our approach is defensive, escalatory, and complementary. Just a few words about our task, divided in 2 sets: no executive and executive task, just to remind how it's possible for us to achieve the maritime security awareness and to perform a wide range of activities such as a company outside the perimeter of rural engagement. Just because, we don't need to put in place any coercive action against third party in order to build up situational awareness. Different case in terms of executive task, such as protection, ready to react in order to protect with the use of force the merchant vessel under our umbrella in terms of defensive approach, of course. Let me stress, only in territorial water. This is our mandate, to be sure to make clear our defensive approach only in terms of capability to support a merchant vessel in line with the United Nations Security Council resolution dated at the beginning of January, number 2272. In the next slide, you can see our area operation. It's a huge area. Nowadays, we are focusing our presence, our action at sea under the aegis of the European Union in the Red Sea, in the Gulf of Aden, and of course in the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, taking account the higher level of risk in this area comparing with the rest of the area, namely the Arabian Sea, the Gulf of Oman, Strait of Hormuz, and the Gulf. So, in order to be effective in terms of situational awareness, we needed to share data, to exchange information with a wide range of actors, not only military side, but also civilian one. You can see in the slide, starting from Atalanta. Atalanta is, as you are well aware, another European Union operation in quite the same area, focusing on the piracy. So let me say, we could be considered Atalanta and Aspides 2 faces of the same medal. The medal is the maritime security operation, 2 faces, 2 aspects. One operation in order to counter the piracy phenomenon. The other one, Aspides, in order to protect the merchant vessel alongside the sea line of communication crossing the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. Other actors in the area, of course, task force involved in the different mission. We need to know each other where there are our ships belong to different task force, just to avoid any kind of let me say, mismatch in terms of activity, in order to guarantee the confliction in terms of presence at sea. Not only, all the civilian actors involved in different area, sub-area, with the same common value to preserve the freedom of navigation and also to guarantee the the right flow information in favor of the merchant vessel sailing the area. I'm talking about the fusion center in New Delhi, in Pakistan, in Muscat, and so on. Not only because, as you can see the slide, all the United Nations entities active in the area, and of course, all the diplomats operating in the area. This set of actors are part of our key leader engagement, of course, and we are keen on to include them in our activity in order to explain our posture and also to make easier our presence at sea. It's crucial for us. Not only, as you can see, different academic entities. Let me say the last but not the least, the maritime cluster, the entire spectrum of the shipping company with the European Union interest. We need to keep in touch with them day by day in order to find down our, let me say, agenda with the respective needs in order to be closer, in order to, in an effective way, meet the needs of the shipping company in the transiting with their merchant vessel in this area. This part of another task, namely the reassurance activity in favor of the merchant shipping cluster in the area. With the next slide, just to provide you more details about what's going on in the area in terms of transit in the Suez Canal and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. It's clear on the left side of the slide the number of the ship transiting in these days, in this week, in the both crucial shock points, comparing with what we saw in the past last year. On the other side of the slide, the right one, you can see on the top the average of the numbers of the merchant vessel of interest of European Union. What does mean of interest of European Union? Not only with the flag of the countries belonging to European Union, but including also the beneficial owner, the key members, the insurance, all the, let me say, connection with a different level in terms of interest, so that we can consider European Union interest ship a wider range of ship, not only the ship with the flag of the countries belonging to European Union framework. On the bottom side, just to provide few data about one of our activities at sea, the so-called close protection. We say close protection instead of escort, because escort is the word in international law belong to the situation, the perimeter of armed conflict. We are outside this arena. We are in a different situation. There isn't any kind of armed conflict between European Union and other, let me say, states. Just to stress, our mandate is only in favor of the protection in the territorial water of the merchant vessel sailing in our area of interest. More figures, more statistics about the ports of European Union and not only, because we know the long wave of the crisis in the area has not yet brought out major change in the activity in the ports. We will see by the end of this year, also because as far we are recording just a different policy in terms of, let me say, stock levels by the company, increasing the stock level in the European Union in order to absorb the increasing number of the sailing activity by the ships, this crossing not in the Red Sea, sailing off the South Africa coast. It means at least 10 days more on navigation, so that the companies have to absorb this change, increasing the stock levels in European Union. This is the first effect that we saw in the last weeks. We will see about the ports in Europe. In particular, all the ports belong to the Mediterranean basin. If there will be a change in terms of strategy by the shipping company, all the companies interested in the trade, let me say, the seaborne trade. With the next slide, in order to make easier to understand what that means, the change, you can see the density of the sea trade at the beginning, at the end of last year, before the crisis, and in the current weeks. It's quite clear to see the decision of the majority of the shipping company to avoid to transit the Red Sea in order to maintain low the level of the risk related to the merchant vessel. Just a few pictures. What does means attack by Houthi in Red Sea? You already know the name of this merchant vessel, True Confidence, the Islanders, Rubimar in the middle of the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, MSC Sky 2, and so that the grand total of the ships hit in the last period is 14. The number of attacks, the average, is more than 190 attacks by missile and drones. This is the numbers of the threat in the area. Let me say, in one hand, the number of attacks. In the other hand, I would like to share with you few data about our activities. We escorted 100 merchant vessels in 10 weeks, thanks the contribution in terms of ships from Germany, France, Italy, and Greece since the very beginning of the operation. As you mentioned before, just in a few weeks following the decision of the European Union Council to start with the operation, on the 19th of February, I was on board ITS Radio with my staff, sailing in the Red Sea, starting with the first cross protection and favor the merchant vessel in the area. How it was possible? Thanks the crucial contribution of these four countries, and in particular the contribution from the Marina Nationale and Marina Militare, already there in the area with the ships, so that was quite easier for me, plug and play, to be supported by the crew of the ships already in the area in terms of knowledge about the dynamics in the region, in terms of capability to share data information with all the actors in the region. With the next slide, yes, just again the emblem of our mission, so that this is in few slides the key features of our operation. Over to you, ready to answer to your question, pending your question. Over.
Many thanks, Commander Costantino, for the important points you made, for the explanation and the data you provided. Interestingly, you underlined the partnership and cooperation aspect of your mission with other countries, with the region. And by the way, there is a strong Italo-French cooperation at sea. It's one of the reasons we invited the French ambassador to give a speech today. By the way, we as EI had the opportunity to visit the Italian Navy Fleet Operational Commander, the CINCNAV at Santa Rosa, and it's really one of the strengths of the Italian military. Now, the commander's speech already touched a lot about shipping, and this is a perfect bridge for the next speaker. Then we will open the floor to questions from the audience. So I'm glad to give the floor to Mr. D'Amico, Vice President of Confitarma, and as a chair of its working group, of Confitarma Working Group on Cyber and Maritime Security, you are familiar with the issues at stake. So my question is, what's your assessment of the risks for shipping through the Red Sea, and how did this assessment evolve since autumn 2023 onwards? And by the way, thank you so much for joining us at TI. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much to invite me here. And again, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Italian Marine Navy, but as well also the French Marine Navy for the support and assistance they are continuing to give to the commercial ships, to our commercial ships in the area. I understand that there is really a very good cooperation and coordination in escorting the vessels, which maybe we think is something very, very easy to be carried out, but it's not like this. There are procedures to be followed, procedures that also our crew have learned in the let's say, in this period of time. For some of them, they are already familiar since we started already since 2008 with the Atalanta mission, when we had the pirates events in the Gulf of Aden. One of our ships, the Cielo di Parigi, was maybe the first one who has been tried to be, let's say, attack and kidnap by pirates who at that time they were with a small wood 5-meter boats with an outboard, and that time we were sailing in 80 miles from the coast. And the way how we defend ourselves was with the fire guns on board of the deck of our vessels. And nowadays instead we have confront ourselves with the drones. So you can see how things has dramatically changed in the area, how technology has been taken over to, let's say, put the commercial navigation at risk. I think that, unfortunately, numbers regarding presence and transiting in the Red Sea through the Mandab al-Bab are decreasing every day. In fact, as of April 15, by Clarkson Research, who is the most important house of research in the shipping side, in gross tonnage in the Gulf of Aden have decreased by 70% compared to the half of December 2023. Reaching basically the last like it was February 68 and March minus 70. This maybe will take us a simplicity to say, but at this point is what are doing these military vessels is completely useless. It is not correct. There is still transit who goes through the area. And the presence of the military vessels in that area is the most important factor, first of all, to give us also some reassurance to the crew of the ships or transit, but also to maintain open the commercial viable through that area, which I would like to remember is 10% of the global seaborne who is transiting through Suez Canal and the Red Sea, 20% of the container transit vessels. As another number, and to give the increasing number of ships who are now going through Cape of Good Hope, is the last week we had 800 transit, 802, when the previous week there were 670. So the situation is not let's say, yet, I wouldn't say safe, but makes to under control. There is also fact that this situation is also of great concern, not only by ship owners, but also by the shippers, by the charters, who basically do not want to take in this moment the risk to transit. We must, of course, again, I reiterate, to support all our military efforts together with all the diplomatic efforts in order to maintain this lane of commercial sea, which is so important. Also because when there are, of course, in dealing with this longer hauls, which is depends where you arrive, but it goes around 20 days, there is a huge increase in terms of cost for the bunker vessels. We have also another important point, which is the backlog for all the logistic chain in the import and export, especially for dependable goods, which at this point has been obliged in certain cases to change completely the expeditions, not anymore by sea, but by airplane, which you can imagine how much costs more. And another factor which nowadays we are undervalued, we are mentioning much less, but it should be at top of our agenda, is the increase of CO2 emissions that we are having here, which we calculate are among 2 million tons for CO2 emissions more for the same amounts of goods that we are transporting. So you can imagine how much is important that we are able to reestablish this, this navigation, which it is a fact that it is at the moment a very risky one. Nevertheless, we have seen also from what has happened just yesterday, a ship was basically not in reality hit, but was the missile very near. But this was possible because there was the intervention of the military side with intelligence, with all the let's say, the technology, and there was no injured among the crew. The ships could continue to sail by itself, and I think that this is also very important. On the other side, the activity from you, the EU, at a certain point was pretending to explain to us was only concentrated on a certain type of target, American interest, or let's say Israeli interest, as a last, let's say, last controller of the ships is not correct, because the ships which has hit yesterday belongs to Greek ship owners, has nothing to do with the, let's say, nationality of US or Israelis. So Aspides is doing a great job. Has been here also said that there must be much more coordination, maybe to do only one operation or a little bit more. Contrary maybe what I said before, I have to say that at least recently we have lost a little bit of the German and from the Dutch and the Belgian, who seems coupled with technical problems. Another one just left the operation. Basically, remain only the Italy and France, and it cannot be this. It cannot be this because if we are, first of all, we are EU, so there should be a large part, at least a large part of the countries present in the area, because interests are only relates maybe to the Mediterranean countries, or maybe more for Italy, or also a big part for France. I think it's for everybody, because goods who are also transiting or are discharged in the Mediterranean, not stop only to the Mediterranean countries, but goes also north side. And this, of course, is in the interest not only of few countries, but of all our countries. Just another, curiosity. Insurance cost is important, but we were expecting actually a higher cost there to be increasing more, where instead a certain stability has remaining in this area. Of course, for those who also has on board private guards, as for example our ships has when we transit in that area, there are, you can allow also of discount of insurance. So just to say that there is, let's say, a pragmatic approach by the insurance world in this respect. Is not only speculative, as sometimes the situation easily creates. Finally, from my side, I thank these events, because these events are really very helpful, besides what you read in the newspapers that sometimes are not so correct, so accurate. But here, with this, let's say, important different vision and different contribution to our discussion are very important to, let's say, hold the light flash on this issue, not forgetting that there are important that the goods can navigate, but also that our crew continue to sail safe and healthy. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mr. D'Amico, for this honest, pragmatic view on the value of military protection for vessels to keep the sea line of communication open and to uphold the principle of freedom of navigation. Thanks also for the data and the points you made on the logistic chains, on the transport cost, on the environmental impact of this disruption of trade. Very interesting point. Now, the floor is open for questions and brief comments. Please raise your hand and just say your name and surname. And I see already 2 people on the first line and the third one on the back. Please.
Thank you very much. I am Maurizio Melani, and I have 2 questions mainly for our 2 guests from the Gulf. The first is that considering the end of the Joint Cooperation Plan of Action after the withdrawal from it by President Trump, what do you think that should be done in order to avoid that Iran can acquire a nuclear military capability, which would change dramatically the strategic situation in the area? The second question, which is partly related to this one, is concerning the Palestinian issue and its consequences on what we are discussing today. In particular, do you think that if what the United States, the European Union and its member states, the Arab neighbors of Israel are working on in order to have the ceasefire in Gaza, the liberation of hostages, and also the reactivation of a process for a 2-state solution will end what is happening, and the action of Houthi could stop, and also the action of those who are behind the Houthi will stop, and what should be done in order that those that are behind the Houthi and the Houthi themselves would stop this action once that this process on the Palestinian issue would be put in place. Thank you.
I will collect 3 questions to the audience.
Thank you very much. My name is Paolo Casardi. I'm the co-chairman of the Circle for Diplomatic Studies. And I would like to underline that this effort in the maritime sector has been probably the only one that the European Union could be able to sustain in the area. And that has been quite well shown by the intervention of the French ambassador, Monsieur Briens. And so in these circumstances, and with all the details that we could be able to hear, together with the excellent interventions of our two friends from the Gulf, I would like to ask especially to Mr. D'Amico that in the present situation that sees, if I understood well, only half of the previous traffic still going through the Suez Canal. Can we hope that in the present conditions of protection, the traffic can be implemented in some way, or we are already at the point that we should ask to the same nations that provided help up to now to increase the number of ships? What is your judgment as Vice President of the Italian Armatori Shipping, yes, the shipping organization? What is the judgment about the present conditions of the protection? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since the plate is already quite full with some great questions, I will just limit myself to a short comment. My name is Elio Calcagna. I'm a defense researcher here at the Institute. So I'm not an expert on the region. I work on defense mainly, and I'm also a bit of a navalist, so my comment sort of, you know, takes that into account. But, you know, we know that open and safe sea trade routes are a founding principle, I would say, of our international system and have been for a few decades, and so is, of course, freedom of navigation. You know, from my perspective, there are two interesting takeaways from the situation at the moment. And one is that this principle is no longer really shared, or its understanding is not shared, you know, at a global, from a global perspective. We can think of the discussions preceding the UN Security Council resolution in early January, when China and Russia disagreed on some of the terminology. You know, they didn't want the resolution to recognize the right of states to protect their commercial shipping. They just wanted to take note. You know, I think on the freedom of navigation, which I think has been fairly unique in its uniting, you know, potential in the last few decades. This is quite interesting. And the second takeaway is that there are divisions, you know, as a European in the West as to what to do about something like this, right? You know, quite stark divisions as well. And, you know, I'm not saying that the de-escalatory as it has been defined approach by the EU is right or wrong, but from my understanding, I think we should really be ready for the consequences that are coming from the situation. And one of them, and I think this is unprecedented in at least in the last few decades, is that from threatening quite severely the freedom of navigation in international waters, such as in the Red Sea, there aren't really, let's say, united consequences or a united understanding of what to do about it. And I think some actors around the world are definitely taking note of this as a very powerful instrument for, you know, for, let's say, public relations or for achieving certain goals. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for your presentations, by the way.
Thank you to the audience for these 3 questions. I know some people have to leave in advance, but thank you anyhow for spending almost 2 hours with us. I will go with the same order of the panel. So, Mr. Bahoun, Mr. Bader, if you want to start, and then we turn to Mr. D'Amico.
Allow me to start and also get the chance to make some comments on what has been said previously. On the question of Israel, Palestine, I agree. I think Maria have framed it. This is practically the regional ecosystem of instability. Anything that has to do with instability in the region has to do with these two, Israel and Iran. This is the thesis and antithesis. They keep fighting, and this is the reason. And our approach in the UAE to address it is to invest in statehood, invest in the statehood of Israel through the Abrahamic Accord, but also invest in the statehood of Iran through de-escalation. My view, my own view, is that 3 years of de-escalation with Iran has accounted for more behavior modification rather than 30 years of isolation strategy from the US since the Iraq-Iran war. There was maximum pressure on Iran, not Trump. This was way before. And we've seen Iran become an enemy, it was isolated politically because it was the axis of evil, isolated economically because of the sanctions, isolated security because the Iran nuclear program was a threat to everyone, but most dangerously it was isolated culturally through the Sunni Shia crescents, which affected us. All of this did not affect Iran. It is not less influential in the region. It did not stop it from expanding. And of course, it didn't change the regime. So this is a new way. Iran attack on Israel is the most positive sign we have seen. It's the most positive sign because of the manner of the attack. It did not come from non-state actors. It came directly from state actors. It came in collaboration. They have given ample sign to everyone. We've told the region, we've told Oman, we've told others in the region this is happening. We've relayed message to the US and to Israel that this is happening. When the attack happened, 8 hours of advance, and they made sure that there is no civilian casualties. This is not the Iran that we used to know about. This is a changed Iran that is playing the role of a state. It is not as the same. I think we need to look more carefully at how all of these changes that are happening. So this is on Iran and nuclear. Nuclear weapon will be the same. And in my view, Israel is facing one of its most existential threats right now. It's not using nuclear weapons, even though they have them. As Pakistan and Iran were met together, they did not use nuclear weapons. Iran, in my view, will always maintain the nuclear weapon capability. It's far more strategically advantageous to it than actually having nuclear weapon and having to go through all of that. Now, if Iran did not use this current situation to announce a breakthrough capability, when is it going to use it? If Iran announces it today, it will be shared, across the Arab street, there will be people clapping and say, finally, we got someone who can stand up to Israel. They didn't do that. And I ask myself, when are they going to do it if this is the most fortunate time for them to do it? Iran has signaled to Lebanon to go ahead with the maritime security, maritime borders. And they have already signaled to them to go through the land borders, because before 7th of October, there were already talks between Lebanon and Israel on the land borders. So this is a changed Iran that we need to think. We have managed to do more with Iran in the escalation, frankly, than we did with Israel when it comes to the Palestinian state. Because the concept of the Abrahamic Accords was to bring down this struggle from a struggle of identity between Islam and Judaism back to a political struggle that we can deal with. And we should have done that. We should have had the opportunity. Unfortunately, the current government in Israel is far more religious than state. And the non-state actors of Israel are far more representative now in their government than they have been. So this is on this concept of the instability of the ecosystem of regional instability. But the ecosystem of global instability is US, China, Russia competition. And the issue of China and Russia not supporting this is part of fear, because they will see this as a segue for US, Europe to intervene in Taiwan or in the Black Sea. And we have, this is not the only one. I mean, even in the discussions with space debris, the satellites, ways of salvaging those old satellites, bring them down, has been stopped because they're afraid that those harpoons used to capture those satellites will be used to bring down intelligent satellites. So this issue of lack of confidence is affecting everything, and I think it will keep affecting us. And one more comment on, two more comments, sorry. One on state, non-state actors. We're seeing a huge proliferation of non-state actors. Non-state actors. It's, you mentioned the Houthis and who are behind them. Behind them is Iran, we know this. But why was Iran successful in making non-state actors, the Houthis, who came from the backwaters of Saada, to have advanced weapon systems like cruise missiles, when state countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others, don't have them? UAE does not have ballistic missiles. They don't have cruise missiles. The only thing close to is Shaheen, which can be launched out of the Dash 9, the Mirage Dash 9. Other than that, we don't have anything. Because they've shared information, they shared technology. This is something that Europe did not share with the UAE, or with Saudi, or with the Gulf. US did not share, because they think that, no, these are irresponsible guys, we cannot give them that technology. Iran is doing that. This is again back to the very tacit remark Badr said, is that talk to us. It's not only talk to us. Deal with us as partners. We hear the word partnership, but it's like music to our eyes. We hear it, but we do not see it. There is no action to support it. So this is the one more point I would like to make about the freedom of navigation. Freedom of navigation is a concept that is possibly going to disappear. There will be other concepts that will be required. The sea is not only for navigation. We're talking about high sea. But as we go forward, those waters, high sea waters, will become a major lung for Earth. Most of our oxygen and carbon will be captured through seaweed and microalgae, not through the Amazon. The Amazon is so much struggling now. Most of our food security will come from protein from seaweed and algae, not from soybean. This is the future of our food security. Most of our renewable energy will come from the high seas. Wind, current, and solar turning into hydrogen. This will come from high seas. Urban or marine urbanization will happen in the high sea. When there's higher sea level, when it increases, places like Holland will be submerged by seawater. That means they will not be agrable anymore. We will need to find agriculture in the sea. This is the new technology everyone is looking for. So this concept of freedom of navigation will not be real. We have to think other concepts right now, today. This is the way a partnership for the future should be established. Not partnership in the future based on our, let's say, European need for energy right now. This is what we need because we cut off Russian oil. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Actually, I'll continue from where you stopped, Mohammed, because I'm in full agreement. We see the problem is our size in the global matter of affairs is not big, but we've been playing an outsized role because of different factors, whether it be the energy component that we boast or our geographic region, surrounded by the 4 waterways that are crucial to shipping and navigation. So that has inculcated a sense among Gulf, in the mainstream, among Gulf policymakers and people, of the need to tie in their specific lens to the global, regional and global lenses. So we cannot have security for us without security for others. And we, and if I may add Mohammed to this bucket, we invite our European partners to think along those lines. The force commander is doing a great job with the project's mandate, but as you saw from the executive task, it's protecting European vessels. We will not be safe if we only protect European vessels. Navigation is for everyone. Those rights are for everyone. And we need to broaden the horizon. We need to think of the role that Iran and Palestine plays in the global matter of affairs. Iran wants to be a normal state. It has been stripped of normalcy because of US failed actions that we, by the way, in the Gulf fell for the longest time. It's only in the recent time span that we've decided to quietly move away from that direction. Now, allow Iranians to do the job. When you de-escalate, you let them focus on domestic matters, and you saw what happened when they de-escalated, the US and GACPOA. You had one of the biggest protests because the people began, demanding their own rights, whether it comes to women or other issues. Let's not give them room to have that energy of boasting that they're fighting a superpower, the same playbook that the Houthis are now using for no purpose. So I think that needs to be done. That vision, that global vision needs to be put out among our partners, whether in Europe or in other spheres. And when it comes to Palestine, look, the two-state solution is not something that we in the Gulf are holding back. It's not something that, it's something that Israel is holding back. Whether it's this government or other iterations, the scale, let's put Gaza on the side right now because it's beyond Gaza, I think. The scale of attacks in the past few decades and the settlement activity is a translation of there is no two-state solution. And if there will to be a two-state solution, it's according to our terms, us, Israel. And that's not going to go through. Israeli national security should understand and be premised on a Palestinian state. It serves them more than it serves anyone else on the table, whether from the Gulf or from Europe. And that's what we need our partners in Europe and the US to realize and to push accordingly, because we can't keep paying the bills. We're all stuck with discord, deaths, hunger issues in the region, humanitarian issues. You're stuck with higher insurance costs, fuel. There's a laundry list that we can go through. And it goes back to people feeling that there is an injustice wrought upon them. We need to take that away from those non-state actors, which will be very innovative in finding another reason for them to exist. This will not end with this. Even with the two-state solution, if you have a free and viable Palestine, they'll find something else to go off on because it's an ideological way of moving about it. We need to think along those lines. I think it's the meta issues that should guide our discussions, and then they fall into the policy. But there is that gap, unfortunately, that we keep going back and again to the same issues.
Now, I will just add one thing because I know that we are short on time, but I really liked our conversation because we went to the very micro issue of Aspides, but then we broadened up on the macro level. And I think that to maybe some wrapping up thoughts from my side is to say that, we clearly see that there is a lot of work behind the fact of trying to neutralize the threats, and I think evidence shows that it can work, but also political analysis is telling us that if these threats end, there will be another one that will come up if we don't resolve other issues that are underneath the regional instability. So in some way, that said, I will say that the solution that we are trying to sort of lay out here is how to prevent that this new threat will arise. And I guess that what is emerging is that Aspides is good, okay, but we also need a common approach on how to deal with the regional instability between the EU and the GCC. Now, one thing that I think it's quite interesting, it's the point that has been mentioned before, it's how this mission can in some way integrate other GCC components, especially on information sharing. And I know that we don't have the time here to sort of elaborate on that, but I would like this to be a line of work maybe for us to think about it. And the second one is the diplomacy side, how to embed this mission within the broader diplomatic approach. And I guess that this is more difficult even, but I do believe in the fact that, again, the Israel diplomacy with the Arab world and Iran diplomacy with the Arab world, they are not actually mutually exclusive goals. They can happen at the same time. But for this to happen, we need to restrain Israel offensive actions, and it needs to also restrain Iran offensive action, but also use diplomacy with Iran in order to de-escalate, as you said. So I guess that a European approach would also need to consult with GCC partner on these patterns for de-escalation on both hands of these two players, how to go about with these two players. And maybe the Luxembourg discussion of last week was a bit on that trend, but we need to do more. Last but not least, I think that one point that has been touched is this inability that we still have between Europeans to actually work together. There is a good French-Italian partnership on this, but there is actually, there has been a mention of other EU member states that do not actually have the same approach and fall in line with the US-UK approach. And the same, I think, you have within the GCC, where you have actors like Bahrain, maybe who is more like, you know, on the offensive side, and others who are less on the offensive side. So I think that also this multilateralism on both sides, in order for this common approach to emerge, need to be worked better. And I will leave it at that.
It is a fact that there should be more military presence. Not because we needed to fire more missiles, but just to discourage a certain situation. And to be much more coordinated also with other countries. The diplomatic steps are on top of everything. We cannot even think that for maybe next years and years we will patrol the area with military sophisticated ships. What this crisis has learned us, I think, is the fact that every time there is a more escalation, but there is also a more sophisticated escalation. As I was saying before attacking vessels were with the weapons, trying with anchor to board the ships. Now we have to confront with the drones, which becomes really more sophisticated as a factor. There is also the intelligence, which has an incredible important role. If you think who knew, let's say, but even in the shipping scenario, that offer a very prominent ship owner, maybe one of the top 5, at the end of the day, he was an Israeli guy. Nobody. And the Houthi explained to the whole world offer when his first ships, the car carrier, was actually basically was a sized vessel, and still is sized by the Houthis. So this is to say that we are in a difficult situation. This is why diplomacy has to do its role. There must be a de-escalation done by everybody. It's not anymore the time to make only to see the muscle, as has been we learn in our books in history in the past, and to become more reasonable, because at the end of the day, as I was saying, together with the safers and certain countries, but even, and I think this is the first time, even countries of the region are suffering very much about this situation. Try to think for a moment to Egypt. Egypt basically today is dead, is zero. They had only two economic points. Suez Canal, #1, tourist, #2. Both basically dead. So, and I think that Egypt is a country of that area. So we should really hope that there will be basically starting from this ceasefire, maybe that we will reach in the following weeks to be the first move, and then to see how things will go on from that one. Thank you.
Thank you. So thanks a lot for this creative Q&A session, much broader than the original topic, but this is also a signal of interest by the audience and also commitment by the speakers. Let me flag 2 EI studies related to maritime security, both in English, one on naval combat systems, and the second one on the underwater environment, and more to come, perhaps with a more multidisciplinary approach. We're finally closed our meeting, so let me thank first IAI Vice President Michele Nones, who could not make today with us, but has been very helpful in the scientific setting of this meeting. Nathalie Champion as event manager for all the organization. Maria Luisa as a co-leader with me of this endeavor. All the speakers here at IAI and even more from the Red Sea. And special thanks to the participants, which in this lovely sunny day at the end of April, before a national holiday, decided to come at IAI. So thank you very much.